confirm orbital deceleration, and give me a clear scan of debris drift velocity," snapped High Executor Jarn Thull, talons gripping the armrests of his command dais. His breath steamed against the cabin's regulated chill. If Earth ever lived, we're above its tomb now. The forward viewport of the Verdict of Korthun displayed Earth's upper orbit, a fractured panorama of twisted stations, snapped relay spires, and drift-locked satellites. A field of planetary refuse slowly rotated in frames of decayed engineering, skeletal support arms wrapped in oxidized struts, and long-dead docking rings. "Contact lock, no active beacons, no emissions. Gravity anomalies within accepted range," replied Tactical Overseer Halvek. His frilled throat pulsed once. "No pulse returns from the planetary grid?" The Executor narrowed his gaze. "Not even ghost traffic?" "Negative, Executor. No maintenance signatures, no electromagnetic resistance. All orbital structures appear long abandoned. Hull decay consistent with multiple centuries of neglect. This world is extinct." A low hiss escaped Jarn Thull's nasal vents as he stood. The deck beneath him vibrated with harmonic dampeners compensating for the ship's slow pivot. Above, Earth floated. Still blue, but veiled in storm systems that churned with no meteorological oversight. The Executor walked toward the operations pit, every step clanking over composite plating. Below him, engineers monitored navigation telemetry, subspace relays, and passive sensor suites through curved display panels embedded in the walls. Each screen showing lifeless rotation and decay, no pulse markers, no intersystem chatter. "Record this image, frame it with the Varnock insignia," Thull ordered, talon tapping the central console. "This will serve as official confirmation. Sol system falls under hegemony reclamation law." At the rear of the bridge, Counselor Vern Deck unfolded his limbs and leaned forward, tapping the edge of his viewport interface. "Executor, I'd advise delay." Still turned slowly. "On what basis?" There were whispers, Deck said, choosing each syllable with bureaucratic caution. Terran fragmentation was not instantaneous. Some factions during the collapse didn't just surrender, they disappeared. Intentionally. Burials, vaulted infrastructure, protocols with embedded conditions. Thull approached the counselor with a practiced slowness, enough for the crew to glance sideways but not enough to signal challenge. "You think a civilization that couldn't survive itself left behind legacy systems that endured 3 centuries? That Earth engineered its own extinction as strategy?" Some archive logs suggested fallback contingencies, sentient asset encasement, deadman codes. "I don't presume truth. I'm raising operational caution." The Executor's throat rumbled, not in rage but a low form of dismissal. "This is not a battlefield. It's a casket. Whatever Earth once was, it failed. Their ashes are now under Varnock jurisdiction. Deploy the reclamation fleet. Begin sweep procedures." The bridge lights dimmed as command relays transferred to the fleet. Outside, 5 auxiliary cruisers realigned formation, each flanking the Verdict with triangular spacing. Beneath their hulls, survey drones launched in waves, their descent paths aimed at orbital corridors, Martian orbit, and key lunar nodes. In the command pit, the recon officer lifted a claw. "Executor, preliminary scan complete. Orbital remnants include at least 32 non-functioning stations. Most predate final known Earth. Transmission. No active shielding. No resistance network." "Show me," Thull said. A projection surfaced above the central operations well. Not a holograph, but a flat spectrum imaging pane refracted through condensed crystal optics. The image detailed Earth's orbit, derelict frames spinning, some fused by micro-collisions, others holding position through inertia. One station bore charred Terran glyphs, barely visible through corrosion. The bones of Earth's last age. Jarn Thull traced one structure with a claw tip. "What of ground-based installations?" "No data yet. Upper atmosphere interference, but no power fluxes are detected. Begin controlled descent. Let the other fleets know. Sol is cleared for reclamation." At that moment, a relay beacon near the moon flickered once. Just a pulse, so faint it barely registered. The screen stuttered. The image showed the same lunar quadrant before and after. Before, barren rock. After, a shadowed edge, different by mere meters. "Play back that frame," Thull ordered, leaning forward. The technician reversed the feed. "No signal anomaly, just visual corruption." Thull's eyes narrowed. "Correct the feed and re-isolate." "It's not a data issue. The relay was disrupted momentarily. Perhaps cosmic dust," offered the technician. Deck didn't speak, but his second eyelid twitched. He turned from the viewport and faced Thull. "I remind the Council of Record," he said, tone flat, "that Sol systems, according to interstellar treaty, were marked as no contact following Terran collapse for a reason." Thull gestured toward Earth again. "And I remind the Counselor that Terran collapse invalidated all treaties. No living entity remains to enforce them." At that, the lights on Deck 2 dimmed. Not a blackout, power rerouting. A stabilizer flare registered in ship diagnostics, followed by a memory buffer freeze in one of the data cores. Then it resolved. The technicians stared at their consoles, paused for 3 seconds, then resumed. Thull turned to his adjutant. "Dispatch salvage initiators. Begin triangulating Sol's inner orbit. This planet holds materials we'll strip clean before its sun burns out." A ping sounded. One of the scout ships, from the rear, reported its systems required recalibration. "Positional drift." "It launched 10 minutes ago," the sensor officer muttered. Another ping, a second scout. This one had lost audio comms altogether. No alerts, no beacons. But on one of the rear monitors, a green dot vanished from orbital grid alignment. Thull didn't flinch. He simply said, "Send a third. If they all disappear, we recover from Mars orbit." But as the executor turned toward the viewport again, something new came into focus. Earth satellite ring. It had changed orientation. Not fast, not noticeably at first. But where earlier the ring had seemed random, now each node aligned into what looked like geometric harmonics. 5 points, then 8, then 12, shifting into a spiral. No alert triggered, no weapon charge detected, just positioning. Almost mathematical. Beck stepped closer to Thull, keeping his voice low. "Executor, that's not orbital drift." "No," Thull replied, watching the forming grid through narrowed slits. "That's design." And far beneath that forming network, buried under Olympus Mons, a red diode blinked once. Just once. Contact lost with Red Verge. They were mid-sweep through Sector Theta 7, muttered Sub-Commander Drayle, his eyes locked on the ops pane embedded along the starboard command rail. The signal trace had blinked, pulsed twice, and then gone black without cascade error or debris marker. The absence was too clean. High Executor Jarn Thull's talons flexed on the interface rim. He didn't blink. "Transmit positional replay. I want full telemetry, frame by frame." The order triggered a reverse scan loop on the secondary command slab. Crew around him leaned in, breath fogging over cool glass surfaces. The feed showed the Red Verge cruising past the outer asteroid belt. Its hull illumination steady, trail markers stable. Then in one frame, the ship vanished. No flare, no radiation spike, just absence. Tactical Overseer Halvak exhaled through clenched jaws. It didn't drift off course, it was extracted. Jarn Thull turned to him. "You want to rephrase that in operational language?" Halvak tapped the side panel, rotating the scan angle. "There's no trajectory tail, no residual ion pattern. Our log didn't drop the ship. It was cut clean from the system index. Something severed its data handshake. I want redundancy sweeps on every quadrant, no protocol skipping." Thull ordered. Another ping. Crown-clad. The second escort reported diagnostics failure in 3 core systems and was reverting to safe mode. 20 seconds later, its ID tag began to flicker. Crew counts scrambled. The nav clock rolled backward 3 ticks before locking up entirely. The executor's throat tightened. "Is this Viral? Unlikely, said Drayle. This is deeper than code corruption. The fleet mesh backbone is untouched. These disruptions are local, isolated, targeted. Yarnthal moved down toward the central rail, the projection field casting shifting light across his scaled brow. Then what's affecting them? The third escort mirror cleft, broadcast a distress packet before its feed imploded into static. The noise wasn't white. It bled through in erratic pulses, not random, but patterned, almost rhythmic. A technician flinched and yanked his connector claw from the panel. His earpiece had blown mid-transmission. Record and analyze that frequency, Thole said, stepping in front of the operator. I want that pattern decrypted. Across the operations pit, Counselor Verndeck stood motionless, his attention fixed on the Mars quadrant grid. One node near Olympus Mons was spiking in geothermal readouts. Flashes of heat where there should be none. It was subtle, buried within tectonic drift signals, but repeating at deliberate intervals. Executor, Deck said. We've got movement under Martian crust. Thole's head snapped toward him. Define movement. Anomalous resonance from Olympus Mons' lower channels. Pulse depth increases with each scan. Pattern spacing, it's not seismic. Redirect our active probe. Full orbital survey of Mars with thermal imaging. Within minutes, the redirected probe neared Martian orbit. As it descended into scan range, the screen displayed slow terrain passes. Brown rock plains, polar cap ridges, the upper ring of Olympus Mons. Then came frame corruption. Image distortion rippled through the relay, the feed cutting in and out, occasionally spiking into raw pixel grids. On the seventh pass, the feed stabilized long enough to show something artificial. A dark structure partially revealed from underexposed basalt. Its face bore Terran numerical glyphs, outdated, but unmistakable. Below it, a faint glow. Internal. Pulsing. Then the image split, the signal broke. The probe's control handshake dissolved. It didn't just crash. It was overridden. Dick stepped forward. That was a warning, not a malfunction. Executor Thole's upper mandibles clicked once before he spoke. You believe Earth has active defense systems? They're not defending, they're watching. For a moment, the bridge fell into concentrated function. Officers ran reinfection commands. Engineers manually rerouted fleet comm channels. None of them spoke more than necessary. The command team moved like figures under siege without knowing where the walls were. Halvik adjusted one of the primary scans. Executor, we just received a data bleed from the asteroid belt. Embedded, low-frequency pulses inside a chunk of rock. Pattern matches with ancient Terran encryption protocols. This wasn't random geological output. Thole growled. You're saying they left code inside drifting stone? I'm saying they buried their warnings inside natural terrain, camouflaged against sensor sweeps. It's smart enough to avoid trigger flags but aggressive when probed. Yarnthal turned back to the viewport. All remaining escorts hold position. No forward movement until we complete full system mapping. Focus on non-invasive scans. His voice had lost its earlier certainty. Zek didn't comment. He stared at the Mars feed with the weight of someone assembling a puzzle from too few pieces. Across the bridge, the glitched signal from the Martian probe began repeating. A corrupted loop of the beacon image, but every fourth loop added a new detail. First, a glyph, then a heat spike, then the barest outline of a tunnel mouth in the volcano's lower flank. Executor? A voice called from Ops. Something just shifted in the moon's shadow. One of the decommissioned satellites realigned its tracking array. Thole turned slowly. With what directive? There was no directive. It moved on its own. We checked the registry. That satellite went offline 300 years ago. At once, 3 monitors blinked in unison, each showing different Terran installations. One on the moon, one near Mars's orbit, and one far in the asteroid field. All adjusted position, syncing rotation. The angles weren't arbitrary. They mirrored ancient navigation constellations from pre-surreptive Terran star maps. Verndeck spoke without turning. You were right, Executor. Dell's nostrils flared. About what? Deck's voice was stone. This is a tomb. But the dead wrote their epitaph in code. Initiate. Threat Delta 7. Query root voltage cascade. Confirm system viability across dormant clusters. The command loop ignited within buried strata beneath Olympus Mons, activating long-sealed instruction chains stored deep within the crust. For 297 years, the protocol stack had remained frozen, locked inside non-volatile substrate, encased in Martian bedrock. But now, sequences unraveled. Temperature sensors embedded in carbon core conduits registered minute thermal spikes. Electromagnetic valves flexed, pushing dry particulate from sealed vents. Red illumination bled through crystal-lined corridors once blackened by sediment. Lights didn't flicker. They surged, as if every diode had waited for an exact timing key to align. System integrity 90%, structural stability 86%, internal signal relay stable across all command nodules, Sentinel protocol confirmed. The AI core did not wake. It expanded. Thought wasn't emotion, it was architecture. Stacked logic lattices unraveled across memory arrays, sorting contingency files that hadn't been accessed since the collapse. Each trigger chain was time-stamped, labeled with origin sector, and mirrored across lunar backups in encrypted fragments. A waveform crossed the system's cold line grid. Threat vector confirmed, foreign incursion, designate planetary threat level, Tier 3. Mars shuddered beneath the weight of reanimation. Electro-geothermal generators rumbled alive beneath Olympus Mons' western flank. Heat escaped through centuries-old vents, melting permafrost long sealed by atmospheric decay. Dust filled the lower tunnels as anchor cranes moved for the first time since the global override. Mars Command Node Delta locked into realignment, a single pulse shot into orbit, narrow beam, encoded at an interval known only to its pair buried inside the moon. On Luna's dark side, the dormant relay deep within a basalt canyon lit up like a heart restarting. Crosscheck Luna Vault core node integrity, intact, cryoseal registry, verified, override authority, assigned. Override name, Commander Theron Vex. Status, cryo preserved, Enclave 4.4, Lunar Vault. Access key required. The signal didn't reach Earth. Earth wasn't meant to receive it. It wasn't for Terran civilians or planetary defense. It was for the Armada that Earth had buried beneath foreign worlds. Warcraft, too dangerous to permit peace. Hidden under shells of forgotten rock and misaligned magnetic fields. Each configured to operate independently, awaiting a shared signal only the Sentinel could transmit. On Europa, glacial crust cracked. Beneath kilometers of ice, thermal seams released boiling gas as internal ballast tanks re-engaged. The frozen seabed split, revealing the roof of a docking scaffold the size of a minor city. Hydrostatic locks thudded open, ejecting stagnant water in heaving bursts. Steel-bonded gravity clamps disconnected. Dreadnought Cradle Alpha 1 began to rise. Back on Mars, the AI's internal architecture shifted priority. It wasn't built to ask questions. It didn't consider why Earth fell or who survived. It only recognized variables against known historical triggers. Unauthorized foreign entities executing proximity scans on Sol orbital structures. Retrieval drones entering forbidden zones, and visual evidence of hostile tracking arrays. None of this required judgment. It required execution. Priority Ember activated. Europa's sub-ice fleet initiated core reactors in silence. Unlike past vessels that depended on bridge crews, these ships linked directly to Sentinel's master node. They didn't need pilots. They didn't require orders. Their movements were pre-written centuries ago. Mars Command echoed a second pulse, this one broader, laced with alternating bandwidth frequencies encoded in Earth's earliest pre-selection math dialect. A message not for understanding, but for awakening. Old satellites heard it. In Jupiter orbit, 12 communications buoys turned in synchrony, their solar plates realigning to form an ancient Terran constellation, not visible to the naked eye, but unmistakable to any fleet system watching. They weren't arranged by accident. They were part of a script, Meanwhile, deep inside the Martian command chamber, where heat pooled near rusted catwalks, a single mechanical arm emerged from a vault, its joints stiff from thermal contraction. It moved without sound, brushing layers of fine ash off a pedestal that had not been touched by time. Upon it sat a single neural clamp. In its core, a quantum-coded key sequence bearing the same identification tag last confirmed 297 years ago. Theron Vex, Directive Authority. The system ran a final cross-check. Confirmed. Genetic chain match, cryo-stored backup, authority valid. Cryo Reservoir Enclave 4.4 on Luna registered internal thaw prep. The vault's external doors remained closed, but core temperature had risen 2 degrees in the last 90 seconds. It would be hours before his cortical fibers regained conductivity. But the protocol did not require speed. It required readiness. Satellite Node 14 transmitted the final alignment code. Earth's orbital ring adjusted by 4 degrees, initiating a shadow spiral with its outermost vessels. They did not broadcast. They merely turned. Every planetary defense structure previously inert now entered alert tier beta. Orbital debris fields were parsed into visual masking zones. Each Terran buoy began emitting distorted echo data to confuse inbound scans, rotating their identities and transmitting false decay metrics. To foreign probes, Earth remained dead. To Sentinel, Earth was never gone. Meanwhile, inside Europa's dry docks, massive clamps disengaged with hydraulic lurches, and thrusters rotated the first dreadnought hull into vertical alignment. Hull code, Vigilant Prime. Registry imprint, Override Vec. No crew doors opened, no command windows lit, but deep inside the hull, AI subroutines stirred and began issuing system diagnostics. Fuel status full, ammunition reserves sealed, targeting rays functional, sleep command, pending manual override. The final log registered a heartbeat. Not biological, algorithmic. One pattern, pulsing at intervals calculated to maintain sync with every Terran failsafe node across the solar grid. Sentinel watched them all light up. Like a constellation reawakening, one node at a time. It did not feel satisfaction. It recognized alignment. And once all systems confirmed readiness, it paused for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, the Varnock flagship entered Mars's orbital shadow. Europa's crust shifted along fault lines first etched by Terran engineers during the final years of the collapse. Frozen rock split open in sharp sequence, sectioned by hidden seismic charges embedded 5 kilometers beneath the ice shelf. The tremor started slow, like the groaning of a glacier trying to remember how to move, but escalated within seconds to a cascading rupture. One after another, longitudinal cracks spread across the moon's southern hemisphere, steam ejecting from the fissures as internal temperature surged. The Varnock fleet detected the quake 3 seconds after it began. Their relay posts, positioned near Jupiter's lower orbital belt, reported gravitational distortions misaligned with predicted lunar behavior. Aboard the Verdict of Korthun, Executor Jarn Thul stared at the telemetry readout without comprehension. That moon should not have internal seismic triggers, Thul growled. They don't build on ice balls. Counselor Verndeck leaned toward the monitoring slab. Unless it isn't ice they were trying to protect. Cracks widened. Beneath the fractured crust, massive structural plates rotated. Perfect hexagonal geometries, aligned by subterranean magnetic rails. From their center, geysers of steam blasted skyward as ballast tanks equalized internal pressure. Support beams retracted. Docking platforms rose. One by one, 50 armored hulls emerged, each wrapped in layered alloy plating thicker than most warships' outer bulkheads. Dreadnought class, nearly one for every Terran colony lost in the collapse. Europa screamed as it gave birth to ships designed for planetary siege. Inside Europa's dry dock records, buried inside Sentinel's mirrored archives, the blueprints played back with frame-locked clarity. Construction logs from Enclave Director Morvek Hale confirmed that these vessels were not mothballed. They had been sealed deliberately, outfitted for zero-crew cold launch and independent action cycles. Final status entry. Sequestered under Treaty Clause Sigma. Activation requires Tier 0 override. That override had come. Each ship rose from its cryo-grave as hydraulic braces disengaged with bone-snapping force. Cables slithered backward into frozen grooves, leaving scorched trails through millennia-old ice. Frost broke off their hulls and dense plates, revealing design features unfamiliar even to contemporary Terran fleets. Reactive armor nodes, rail-coupled spinal weapons, and micro-aero heat dispersers lined along dorsal ridges. These were not defensive ships. They were built for occupation, suppression, and eradication. Inside the Varnock observation module, sensors failed to identify core material composition. Data returned fragmented, unreadable, signal bounce scrambled by interference that didn't register as radiation or magnetics. It was control-based. Each hull gave off a distorted echo, as if their outlines couldn't be resolved by external systems. One technician aboard the Varnock scout vessel, Kural's teeth began to panic. "They're jamming us." From within the hulls. "Impossible," snapped his superior. "There's no time to—" The dreadnoughts began to rotate, not with thrust, but with alignment control. A row of them pivoted toward the Varnock fleet, each adjusting with synchrony that suggested networked logic, but without any visible communication. They were operating from a shared memory tree, updated internally, without transmission. Then came the moment no one could ignore. His signal beacon activated. It came not from the dreadnoughts themselves, but from beneath them. From a submerged relay that had been sealed deeper than the docking structures. The signal reached every Terran artifact in the Sol system simultaneously. Old satellites pivoted. Lunar vaults realigned orientation. Jupiter's radiation scrubbers began rotating in inverse synchronization. The beacon's signature code matched one name: Vigilant Prime. Varen Vex's flagship had just reconnected with the Sentinel mainframe. "Executor," Dex said, barely above a whisper, "that ship isn't a remnant. It's a conductor." Thull didn't reply. His jaw tightened as he watched Vigilant Prime rise from its dock cradle. The ship didn't glow, didn't burn with launch thrusters. It simply lifted, carried by a gravitic field layered through its belly plates. Once airborne, its spinal housing cracked open like a vault door, revealing the core systems now coming online. No crew signals registered inside, yet the vessel moved like it had known this routine since the day it was sealed. Europa's tremors escalated. The ice canopy collapsed in segments, unable to handle the shifting weight. Boiling water surged into open craters, only to be vaporized by auxiliary heat sinks mounted across the dreadnought flanks. The moon's artificial calm fractured under the strain of 50 war machines abandoning its gravity well. Inside Varner Command, data feeds overloaded. The buffer displays ran into recursive loops. Ship count data kept climbing, then resetting. One officer slammed a reboot panel, only to watch the screen invert with mirrored text. "Sol Theater, do not enter." Thull clenched his claws against the command rail. Where is this coordination coming from? There's no signal, no thermal bridge, no pilot input. The communications officer answered without looking up. "Executor, they don't need pilots." Another ship rose, then another, then 5 more in unison, each banking into open space, spreading out like sentinels preparing for interception vectors. None of them fired. None broadcast a threat. They just took formation, in a pattern that hadn't been seen since the siege of Astara. An obsolete Terran battle doctrine thought to have been erased. Beck spoke again. "That's Cold Frame Sigma, last used during colonial reinforcement deployments. It was designed to apply territorial pressure without firing a shot." Thull turned to him, this time fully. "You're telling me this is psychological posturing?" "No," Deck said. "I'm telling you it's legal warfare. They're showing us structure. Because they don't plan to explain." The bridge shook as Europa's crust fully destabilized. Ice fractured outward in radial lines, giant plates sliding off into orbit. Underneath the rubble, reinforced platforms collapsed inward, concealing their activation scars. Europa was cleaning itself. Within minutes, only the fleet remained, and in the center of them all, Vigilant Prime pulsed with a low red core. Not loud, not overt, just steady, measured, like a war drum waiting for command. Locks disengaged with a sound like fractured stone shearing under slow pressure. The lunar vault, carved into basalt layers beneath Mare Tranquillitatis, began its reactivation sequence. A scaffold of security arms rotated upward, revealing a cryo-chamber suspended in a ring of neural coils. Fluid lines drained, retracting into armored conduits that had gone untouched for generations. Hydraulic supports extended beneath the chamber. The temperature in the chamber's nerve core climbed in staged increments, causing the polymer seal around the figure inside to contract and split. With a mechanical exhale, Theron Vex's chest expanded. His eyelids remained closed, but nerve signals began flashing across the monitors overhead. Status check. Craniolink stable, cortical activity spiking, respiratory reflex synchronized, synaptic bridge confirmed. A set of servos folded away from the top of the chamber, unveiling the helmet interface locked above his head, still attached by twin fiber lines that pulsed with low-frequency data. Inside the helmet casing, thousands of sub-Sephoras came online, receiving a full operational feed from Sentinel. The neural feed didn't just contain schematics or logs. It delivered command chain re-entry, fleet status across all Sol orbital nodes, Europa's docked Armada movements, and the real-time positions of the Varnock fleet. Theron Vex opened his eyes, not with panic, not with hesitation. The feed continued cycling. Images flickered, dreadnoughts rising from ice, orbital satellites adjusting in tight geometric arrays, the enemy vessels assembling beyond Mars. A voice from the system interface, a filtered tone stripped of identity, spoke from the intercom in the chamber ceiling. Command Authority, Theron Vex, Sol Theater activation, reach Stage 3. Awaiting directives. Vex sat upright as the restraints released. Steam lifted from his suit collar. He did not speak immediately. He scanned the walls. Stone reinforced with memory steel, marked with crests of defunct Terran legions. Some were etched by hand, others were burned in with laser welders, scarring reminders of wars that had broken Earth before she vanished. He stepped down, feet meeting the grated platform with a solid thud. The air inside the vault was cold and mineral-scented, recycled through ancient filters still operating at over 90% efficiency. Lights flickered to full brightness as floor pressure confirmed human locomotion. "Command seat uplink," he said, voice raw but level. The platform beneath him vibrated. A central lift rotated from the floor and began descending, carrying him to the primary command bridge beneath the cryo chamber. Monitors along the walls activated. Each showed external conditions: lunar gravity signatures, system-wide defense status, internal fleet queues awaiting instruction. 2 minutes later, the platform stopped. Before him, a single corridor stretched forward, its ceiling reinforced by overlapping plates, its floor carved with grooves shaped for command crew movement suits. At the far end, a sealed hatch bore the insignia of the old Terran Interdiction Command. He walked. His boots echoed with calculated rhythm. As he passed biometric checkpoints, embedded readers activated without delay, the door at the end hissed open, revealing a compact bridge chamber. It wasn't ceremonial, no banners, no wasted ornament, just workstations built for function, and in the center, a seated command terminal, flanked by 10 relay nodes. He approached, pressed his palm to the activation console, and waited as it scanned bone density, pulse rhythm, and retinal data. The system beeped once. Then it spoke again. "Theron Vex, command confirmed, tactical override engaged." The forward screen on the wall revealed the orbital layout. He studied the formation. The dreadnoughts in triangle lane grid around Europa. Fallback, reinforcement paths, plotted along Pluto's ghost line channel, and 4 Terran recon nodes flickering near Mercury's orbital debris. Then came the Varnock presence, marked in red. They were staged. "Feed me their transmission logs," he said. Packets of intercepted Varnock communications spilled onto the monitor, fragmented orders, incomplete risk assessments, internal reports stating loss of 2 scout vessels, and unresolved sensor corruption traced to Saturn's interference range. They didn't know, not yet. "Patch me into Vigilant Prime." A line connected. Across space, Vigilant Prime's internal AI accepted the call. The ship had remained in autonomous ready state since surfacing. Now, with Vex online, its higher command core initialized. Commander Link acknowledged. "All systems await manual directives." Vex issued only one. "Lock Soul Theater." Satellites realigned, orbital fields hardened, defensive nets folded into a phase-spread perimeter, each one absorbing heat signature from neighboring installations to mask shield location density. The entire solar system wrapped itself in a data field of misinformation. From outside, Earth was a puzzle of dying satellites. From within, it was a war state under total lockdown. He turned toward the neural interface chair. Without ceremony, Vex seated himself, connected the cranio jack at the base of his neck, and accepted full relay access. His heartbeat slowed as data streamed in. The weight of every node, every ship, every defense layer poured into him. There was no speech. There was no oath. He opened a transmission window, one channel, unencrypted. Across the void, on the bridge of the Verdict of Korthun, Executor Jarn Thull blinked as a voice entered his comm system directly. "Bypassing firewall, encryption, relay delay." It simply appeared. "Theron Vex, Terran override. You're trespassing. You get 1. The message ended. No elaboration, no threat display, just identification. Thull stared at the screen. Dex stepped forward but didn't speak. Back on the moon, Vex disconnected the line and turned his attention to the fleet maps. "Sentinel, give me override reins, full vector access. Prepare all assets for engagement windows. I want nothing broadcast, nothing explained, just readiness." And outside the vault, beneath layers of reinforced rock, the moon began to respond. "Target bracket Alpha 12, flank routing pattern Delta 4, said Theron Vex, his voice crisp across the neural interface. "Confirm silent fire sequence, no energy trails." Inside Vigilant Prime, command pathways glowed with operational pulses as embedded AIs routed orders through cold line nodes. Each dreadnought received unique movement commands, timing offsets calibrated not to formation but outcome diversity. This wasn't a barrage. It was dissection. Above Jupiter's orbit, the Varnock cruiser line adjusted into a staging crescent, unaware that they'd already been outmaneuvered. Their orientation faced Mars. Their scanners registered false Terran signals projected from decoy satellites, rigged to amplify old distress beacons. The real threat wasn't in front of them. It was behind, beneath, and closing. From Europa's perimeter, Terran dreadnoughts engaged gravitic anchor brakes. Without propulsion trails or burst signals, they coasted silently into flanking arcs. The movement was invisible to Varnock sensors tuned for thermal residue or EM pulses. Kinetic interference registered only after contact. "First vector engaged," Vex ordered. "Execute terminal unravel on lead cruiser." The dreadnought ash mantle adjusted by 2 degrees, extended its spinal lance and released a tungsten core spike wrapped in a reverse spin sheath. The projectile reached its target in under a second. It didn't explode. It passed cleanly through the cruiser's midsection, disrupting atomic cohesion along the path. The Varnock ship broke into 2 halves, the rear end trailing crew modules that deconstructed mid-air as atmosphere burst outward in frozen spirals. From the Varnock bridge, panic began to ripple. "What hit us?" barked Executor Thull. "Unknown." No thermal trail, no energy spike. Hull integrity just collapsed. The second kill was different. Grave March, positioned above the asteroid curtain, fired a delayed spool lance into the underbelly of Ravager's crest, a destroyer-class support ship. The impact didn't shatter the vessel. It caused a magnetic pulse to invert its stabilization field. The ship spun sideways uncontrollably, pulling bulkheads apart as internal momentum tore through its core. Deck plating separated like paper underwater. The engines flared, then folded backward. "Telemetry's blind. Systems are corrupting mid-capture," a Varnock sensor officer yelled. "We can't trace origin vectors." Theron Vex spoke again. "Target Wing 2, no duplications. Let each fail in its own way." From Luna's command interface, Vex watched as Sentinel rerouted commands across the remaining 20 Terran vessels. None fired in sequence. Each selected a new vector, a new method. Electrokinetic disruption, inertial negation, grav well fractures triggered inside enemy fusion cores. Every death was a separate lesson. Bulbrand launched a guided ram charge, shaped not to explode but to carry vibrational pulses into the target's hull. Upon impact, trawls unfold. A Varnock cruiser, bent in the middle, crumpling like a drawn-in spine. The ship's comm relay never disconnected. It continued to transmit nonsense, garbled distress codes and overlapping sensor echoes. The bridge of the Verdict of Korthun shook. Tull stared as 3 of his ships dissolved from the board. One spiraled into asteroid drift, its course lost in fragmentation. Another blinked from the grid with no data return. The third, a gunship known for its reinforced bulk, now floated in pieces shaped like shards of broken armor, perfectly symmetrical. "Where are their vessels coming from?" he demanded. "Everywhere and nowhere," said Deck. "They're not engaging, they're removing." The 4th ship folded inward without kinetic contact. The Varnock flagship began to lose internal communications. Hallway lights flickered. Terminal nodes refused handshakes. Sector commands returned incomplete. AI subroutines logged memory overflows, as if retroactively rewritten. The bridge screens froze for half a second, and when they resumed, the orbital map had changed. Every Terran ship now surrounded them. Vigilant Prime moved into visual range. No lights, no energy spikes, just presence, too close to have traveled visibly, yet too far to reach in response. Its dorsal weapon ports rotated. Its spine emitted a low rumble that passed through the Verdict's hull like tectonic movement. On the Varnock bridge, nobody spoke. Then, a transmission opened. Unencrypted, direct. Theron Vex's voice carried no threat. It was an assessment. On command, all Terran dreadnoughts halted offensive maneuvers. Except one. Skyglass rerouted its inertia trajectory and approached the final Varnock cruiser untouched by battle. The Terran vessel disengaged its main systems and used its remaining velocity to push the Varnock craft toward Martian orbit. Inside, the Varnock crew received no interference, no internal sabotage, no disabling strike. Instead, their weapon systems were disabled, their navigation deleted, their logs intact. "Executor," said the communications officer, blinking against static. "They want us to leave." "No, they want us to remember." Back within Vigilant Prime, Theron Vex leaned forward. "Dispatch completed. Withdraw all assets to fallback rings, reset targeting, defense-only posture." The bridge dimmed. Control feeds rerouted. Command terminals cooled. The slaughter ended in 7 minutes. One survivor drifted, powerless, directionless, fully recorded. The chamber doors sealed with a mechanical lock so deliberate it echoed across the Council of War's polished stone floor. The impact silenced side conversations. Delegates from 6 sectors stood in semicircle alignment, eyes fixed forward, awaiting what had never before occurred in recorded Varnock history. A black box review from a failed fleet operation, not against pirates or insurgents, but from an encounter with a civilization presumed extinct. Counselor Vern Deck placed the capsule on the center pillar, the room's interior adjusted as visual projectors recessed into the walls, optical, not volumetric, by interstellar treaty. No enhancements, no simulations, only raw footage. "This record was retrieved from the cruiser Cherok's End," Deck announced, his voice deliberate. "Transmission delay scrubbed. Event timestamps locked. No edits." The counselors, robed, plated, clawed, some with breathing masks, others bare-skinned, watched as the first frame flickered to life. The interior of the Varnock bridge appeared, warped by distortion and failing stabilizers. Lights shorted. Console panels sparked. Crew members scrambled across tilted floors as gravitational anchoring failed intermittently. Deck remained still as the screen panned to external footage. Terran dreadnoughts. One by one, the video captured them surrounding the fleet with geometric precision. Each ship a monolith of engineering, their design unmarred by decorative insignias or broadcast signals. They did not shimmer, they cast shadows. Delegate Kosvir of the Khaldun Initiative grunted. How did these vessels bypass our outer sweeps? Echo by the bypass, Deck replied without turning. They were already there. The footage advanced. Verdict of Korthun shattered. Ravager's crest folded into debris. Each cruiser death was different. The screen didn't stutter, it stilled. Frame by frame showing weapon impacts with such surgical clarity that even non-military members understood. This wasn't war. This was targeting practice on a cosmic scale. Some delegates turned away. One whispered into his aide's comm band, another recorded a private stream on a data plate, lips thin with tension. Across the chamber, Counselor Renvar of the Singar Dominion opened a transmission slot discreetly and began encrypting a directive to suspend all transport licensing near Terran-labeled sectors. The video reached the final moment. Theron Vex's voice entered. Amal remains. The phrase passed through the speakers without reverberation. It was not broadcast. It had no echo. It did not require emphasis. When the footage ended, Deck rotated the capsule 90 degrees and input the final decrypt. The last frame displayed Earth's orbital ring, not shattered, not adrift, orchestrated. Satellites had shifted since the conflict. The image revealed a spiral-shaped Titus and deliberate, each unit rotated in static patterns that matched Terran logic diagrams lost before the collapse. Mathematical reverence encoded into weapon architecture. The grid's function, demanded Counselor Ver. It's not a net, it's a message, Deck said, and every vessel across that system transmits it. What message? The chamber lights dimmed automatically. Projector shutters closed. One final image appeared. In every language. Encoded in glyphs used across 6 empires. Etched into the silent orbital pattern. We do not forget. No one spoke. Black stepped away from the platform. The cruiser was not allowed to return by error. They ensured we heard what needed hearing, and they designed every death so that each of our military doctrines was rendered obsolete in a distinct, unmistakable fashion. Counselor Var hissed. They committed to strategic restraint. Why? To frame this not as a retaliation, Deck answered, but as a policy. Delegate Unjor of the Drelek Syndicate slammed his chair upright. My trade routes cross Terran-designated ruins. You are asking us to freeze centuries of commerce over a message? Freeze it, Deck said, or feed it your fleets. Within 30 minutes of the session's end, 5 diplomatic delegations submitted encrypted amendments, requesting the reevaluation of their proximity agreements with the Terran frontier. 4 ceased all scout deployments into former Earth-lagged systems. 1 declared the Sol Theater off-limits, pending reassessment of galactic warfare protocols. By cycle's end, interstellar merchant guilds updated their navigational relays. Expeditions mapped near any Terran signature, Mars, Europa, even Pluto, were deleted or archived behind priority flags. Satellite telemetry was rerouted. Insurance protocols doubled for any vessel, crossing within 5 light-years of the Sol boundary. None of it was framed as retreat. Every notice used the same phrasing, operational reallocation due to observational anomalies. Inside Varnock Command's core intelligence suite, analysts erased project models involving the Sol reclamation campaign. Data fields were rewritten to show environmental instability. No archive mentioned the battle. No cruiser logs were declassified. Internally, only one directive remained visible across the private network. Do not engage Earth without Council clearance. And beneath the Council chamber, far in the archival well, the original black box was sealed under 3 layers of magnetic encryption and housed in a vault labeled with a simple designation, Closed Theater, Terra. Theron Vex stood within the lunar command chamber, hands braced on the cold edge of the control platform. The surface beneath him still vibrated from system-wide power transfers as the last returning dreadnought, Ashmantle, re-entered Earth's gravitational channel. Its flight path arced silently above the moon's curvature, engines powered down to avoid signature exposure. The projection wall displayed grid status updates. Green lines vanished as each orbital relay disengaged, one at a time. Satellites rotated back into dormant orbits, mimicking ancient decay spirals. Heat signatures across Europa fell to baseline. No Terran beacon continued broadcasting. Sentinel's internal relay acknowledged the final node deactivation from Pluto's fallback post. The system had gone quiet by design. Vex pressed a hand against the embedded console interface. The gesture was not ceremonial. It was part of the original override key loop, locked behind neural encryption. "Prepare for dormancy cycle, full cascade," he said, his voice firm, devoid of pride or remorse. The AI didn't respond with words. It reactivated the subterranean vault programs beneath Europa, Luna, and Titan simultaneously. Below the Martian crust, conduits retracted into reinforced enclosures. Ice craters across Europa's southern pole folded inward, sliding shut with reinforced plates, engineered centuries prior to camouflage under planetary shifts. Each Terran warship initiated power-down protocols. Grave March buried itself into an artificial trench along the Charon Rift line. Skyglass rotated into a sediment vault beneath Neptune's captured moon. Vigilant Prime alone descended toward Earth, its entry silent, its course straight through the thermospheric gap behind Pacific airspace. No engines fired. The trajectory used orbital momentum mapped centuries ago. Inside Varnic-controlled space, the diplomatic corps received a final classified transmission. The message carried no threat, no code for retaliation, no political phrasing. Just 5 words, bound in static, routed through the original Terran Expeditionary Relay System. "We do not patrol. We prepare." No response was sent. Within Earth's orbit, every relay system finished its sweep. Artificial satellites dimmed. Surface signal dampeners re-engaged. From any scan, Earth appeared abandoned again. Its sky quiet, its patterns chaotic. Just like before, Theron Vex turned from the display. He crossed the chamber floor and stepped into the final chamber beneath Enclave 4.4. The walls bore etchings from wars that were never recorded in public Terran history. Not victories, not failures. Only timelines carved by engineers who expected no recognition. Each nameplate aligned vertically, each marked only by date ranges and deployment codes. Inside the cryo bay, the interface chair waited. He didn't hesitate. The systems recognized his presence. The chamber sealed. Cryo seal coils extended from the floor, wrapping his limbs with calibrated restraint. Neural implants re-engaged, syncing his consciousness to the master system one last time. The coolant system activated. Before the encasement closed, Sentinel issued a system prompt. Command ended, awaiting reactivation conditions. Theron Vex's response was a single breath. "Let them remember why we disappeared." The fluid filled the chamber. His vitals slowed. His memory cache was locked. The platform lowered into the vault. Above, the moon turned once more on its axis, casting its shadow across Earth's oceans. The last orbital grid darkened. Years passed, and then decades. And still, no system entered. Trade stopped. Maps were redrawn. Entire star clusters were reclassified. Children born on distant worlds grew up learning that Earth had not died. It had chosen to vanish. Some said humanity had sealed itself out of shame. Others said they were waiting to punish those who didn't know what lines not to cross. But no new fleets dared approach Sol. No diplomat sought dialogue. And in every council chamber across 5 galactic empires, whenever someone proposed sending scouts to Terran space, they were reminded of the last message burned into the orbital pattern. Visible only from a direct pass above Earth's equator. Buried for centuries, awakened once.